I never thought I would find myself telling this story, but sometimes life has a way of teaching us lessons through the very things we thought would save us. I was just an ordinary person searching for something extraordinary, or maybe I was just longing for the kind of love that made the world feel softer, the kind of love that made mornings worth waking up to and nights worth holding on to. When I first met him, it felt like the universe had whispered my name into his heart. He smiled at me like I was the only person in the room, and for a moment I believed I really was, didn't fall in love slowly, the way books and cautious people often advise. We fell like rain in a storm, fast, wild, and without thinking where the ground was. He would text me good morning before the sun rose and good night long after I'd fallen asleep with the phone still in my hand. He said all the right words, and I wanted to believe every single one of them. I thought this was what fate looked like, two hearts finding each other at the exact moment they needed to be found. I didn't see the danger in the speed of it, or the cracks that sometimes appeared when someone promises forever too quickly. I only saw his eyes, the warmth in his laugh, the way he held my hand as if it belonged to him, as if I belonged to him. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of the kind of love people write about, the kind of love that heals. And for a while, it really did feel like that. For a while, I thought I had finally found home, but love, I would later learn, doesn't always reveal its truth in grand gestures or obvious betrayals. Sometimes it shows itself in the smallest pauses, in the silences that stretch too long, in the moments when words are spoken but the heart behind them feels far away. At first, I didn't question it. He was busy, I told myself. He had things on his mind. Life gets heavy, and maybe I just needed to be patient. Still, I couldn't ignore the way his phone seemed to be a part of him, almost like a second heartbeat. He would smile at me across the table, but his eyes would flicker down to that glowing screen more often than I wanted to admit. Sometimes I would ask him what was so funny, who he was talking to, and he would brush it off with a laugh and a quick kiss on my forehead, as if affection was enough to erase the unease. And maybe for a while I wanted to believe him, so I convinced myself that trust meant silence, that love meant not asking questions that might make him feel trapped. What I didn't know then was that trust isn't built by pretending not to see. It's built by honesty, by presence, by choosing each other even when no one else is watching. I held on to the version of him that had swept me off my feet, the one who said forever like it was the simplest truth in the world, even as little doubts began to gather like quiet clouds in the back of my mind. I didn't want to believe that a storm could be coming. I only wanted the sunshine we had promised each other in the beginning. The first time I truly felt it, I remember my chest tightening in a way I couldn't explain. We were walking together, his hand loosely holding mine, but his attention was somewhere else. He laughed at a message on his phone, the kind of laugh he used to save just for me, and I felt something sink inside me. I asked who it was, half playful, half afraid, and he said it was just a friend. Just a friend. 2 words so small, yet heavy enough to bruise a heart. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and squeezed my hand as if to say, "Don't think too much about it," but I did. I thought about it all night. I thought about it when he pulled me close, when he kissed me like nothing was wrong. I thought about how he could hold me and still be reaching for someone else in the same breath. That was when I first understood what it meant to be someone's comfort, but not their certainty. I was the hand he held while his eyes searched for something beyond me. I was the branch he clung to, not because he wanted to rest there forever, but because he wasn't ready to let go without somewhere else to land. That realization was like a crack in glass, invisible to everyone else, but sharp and dangerous to me, and yet, instead of walking away, I held on tighter. I told myself that love was about patience, that every relationship had its rough patches, that he would see my worth if I just loved him enough. I didn't know that sometimes, love is not about holding on. Sometimes, it's about seeing the truth before it shatters you completely. Strange how love can make you both blind and painfully aware at the same time. I noticed the way his tone softened when he spoke to certain people on the phone, softer than when he spoke to me. I noticed the way he stayed up late, his face lit by the glow of messages that didn't belong to us. I noticed how the conversations we once drowned in began to dry up, replaced by silences where his mind seemed to wander somewhere far from me, and yet, when he turned his eyes toward me, I still melted. That was the hardest part, the way he could still make me feel like his world in one moment and like an afterthought in the next. I began to feel like I was standing in a waiting room, watching him pace back and forth between doors, unsure which one he truly wanted to walk through. I was the steady hand, the familiar presence, the safe place he returned to when the world outside felt uncertain. But deep down, I knew, I wasn't the dream he was chasing. I was the comfort he refused to let go of while reaching for something brighter in his eyes. The realization hurt in a way that words can barely hold. It wasn't betrayal in the loud, obvious sense. It was something quieter, almost invisible to others, but it hollowed me out all the same. And still, I stayed. I stayed because leaving felt like tearing away a part of myself. I stayed because I thought love meant endurance. I stayed because I was afraid to face the emptiness that might come if I let go. But every day, I felt myself slipping further away from the person I used to be, the person who once believed she was enough. There comes a moment when denial can no longer protect you. Mine came on a rainy evening, when the sky outside wept harder than I could. He was sitting across the room, scrolling, smiling faintly at words I would never read. I called his name once, twice, but his replies were delayed, distracted. That was when it hit me. I wasn't the center of his world anymore. I was orbiting around someone who was already drifting away. The hugs became shorter, the kisses less certain, the warmth in his eyes replaced by a distance I couldn't bridge no matter how much I reached. He still held on to me, yes, but not with the passion of someone choosing me. It felt more like obligation, like he wasn't ready to let go until he had something else to hold. And that truth pierced me deeper than any goodbye could have. Because it meant I was no longer a lover, but a placeholder. I was no longer the dream, just the safety net. Every laugh he shared with me felt borrowed, every promise recycled, every I love you more like a habit than a heartbeat. And still, I tried. I dressed up more, I smiled harder, I cooked his favorite meals, I stayed awake waiting for him even when exhaustion weighed me down. I thought if I could just be more, maybe he would remember what we once had. But love doesn't grow in desperation. It withers there. What I didn't want to admit was that the more I clung, the more he slipped through my fingers, not because I wasn't enough, but because he had already placed part of his heart somewhere else. And in that quiet, undeniable truth, I began to realize, maybe the real betrayal wasn't his alone. Maybe it was mine too, for refusing to love myself enough to walk away. The breaking point doesn't come with a dramatic explosion. It comes in whispers, in the quiet collapse of little things you once overlooked. I remember sitting across from him at dinner, my favorite meal on the table, yet I couldn't taste a thing. He laughed at something on his phone again, his eyes lighting up with a joy that used to belong to us. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer fighting for our love. I was fighting against his absence, was holding on to shadows, to memories, to promises that had already slipped into yesterday. My smile felt heavy, my laughter forced, my heart tired. It was like standing in a house where the walls were cracking, but I kept painting over them, pretending it was still beautiful. Deep down, I knew the truth, he wasn't mine anymore. Not in the way that mattered. He was here in body, but not in spirit. And I was beginning to break under the weight of pretending otherwise. Nights grew longer, filled with questions I couldn't silence. Why am I not enough? What does she have that I don't? How much longer can I live like this? Each question carved deeper into my chest, leaving me restless, sleepless, empty. Yet still, I hesitated. Because walking away felt like erasing years of love, laughter, and memories. Because letting go meant facing the terrifying silence of being alone. But the silence was already here, sitting beside me every night, staring back at me through his distracted eyes, and somewhere inside, a quiet voice began to whisper, "You deserve more than this. You deserve love that doesn't make you beg to be chosen." It started softly, like a murmur in the distance. A whisper I tried to drown out with excuses. He's just tired. Things will get better. Love always finds its way back. But the voice refused to fade. Each day it grew stronger, clearer, more insistent. You deserve to be chosen. You deserve to be loved the way you love. And the more I listened, the more I began to see myself, really see myself. Not as the girl begging for scraps of affection, not as the woman holding her breath waiting for him to remember me, but as someone worthy of more. Someone who had given her all and still been left standing in the cold. Stood in front of the mirror one morning, my eyes swollen from another sleepless night, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Where had my light gone? Where was the laughter that used to dance so freely on my lips? I realized then that the person I needed to fight for wasn't him. It was me. And that realization was both terrifying and liberating. Because it meant I had a choice, stay and keep breaking piece by piece, or leave and begin the painful, uncertain journey of rebuilding myself. My heart still ached for him, still clung to the good memories, still wanted to believe in the version of us that once felt unbreakable. But my soul was begging me to stop settling for half love. To stop being a placeholder in someone else's story. To stop shrinking myself just to fit into spaces I was never meant to belong. The day I finally decided to walk away wasn't loud. It wasn't a storm or a scream. It was quiet, almost gentle, like a final exhale after holding my breath for too long. I woke up and realized I could no longer carry the weight of waiting, of hoping, of clinging to a love that no longer lived here, was still asleep beside me, his face calm, unaware of the war raging in my chest. I studied him, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his lips curved slightly in sleep, the man I had loved so deeply and so fiercely. And yet, I felt more like a stranger in his world than a partner in his heart. That morning, something shifted inside me. I stopped asking, "Does he still love me?" And started asking, "Do I still love myself here?" And the answer was clear. Love should not feel like begging. Love should not feel like waiting in line for scraps of attention. Love should not be a battlefield where one heart bleeds while the other wanders. With trembling hands, I began packing little pieces of myself, not just clothes, but the strength I thought I had lost, the dignity I had buried, the courage I had doubted. Each item I folded felt like reclaiming a part of me. It hurt, God, it hurt more than I can put into words. My chest ached, my hands shook, my tears blurred everything in sight. But beneath the pain, there was something else too, the faintest flicker of freedom. For the first time in a long time, I was choosing me. The first steps after leaving felt unbearable. The silence of my phone, the emptiness of my room, the weight of nights without his presence, it all crashed into me like a tidal wave. I cried until my body ached, until the pillow was soaked through, until there were no more tears left to give, but slowly, in that emptiness, something new began to grow. I started to hear my own voice again, not the broken whispers of someone trying to hold on, but the steady hum of a soul learning to breathe freely. Mornings became softer. The sun felt warmer. I noticed little things I had forgotten, the sound of birds outside my window, the smell of fresh coffee, the way laughter bubbled up when I spent time with people who truly loved me. Healing didn't come all at once. Some days I felt strong, other days I felt shattered. But I kept reminding myself, leaving wasn't the end of love, it was the beginning of self-love. And slowly, the cracks in my heart became spaces for light to enter. I started writing again, dreaming again, rediscovering the pieces of me I had buried beneath someone else's shadow, and one morning, I looked in the mirror and finally recognized her, the woman I had lost, the woman I thought would never come back. She was smiling. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had survived, because she had chosen herself. And in that moment, I realized, walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with strength, healing, and the quiet promise of a love that would one day meet me where I am, without asking me to shrink. And so, this is where the story rests, not in the heartbreak, not in the leaving, but in the becoming. Because every ending carries a seed of beginning. Walking away is never easy. It feels like tearing yourself apart from a dream you once thought would last forever. But sometimes, the bravest act of love is the one you give yourself, the choice to step out of what breaks you, so you can step into what heals you. Maybe you've been here too. Maybe you know the weight of holding on too long, the ache of waiting to be chosen, the fear of being alone. If so, I want you to remember this: you are never too much and you are never not enough. The right love will not make you beg, it will not dim your light, and it will not forget how to hold you. Until then, learn to hold yourself. Pour into your soul, water your own roots, and become so full of love that when it finds you again, it will feel like coming home, not because you were lost, but because you were already whole. This is not the end. This is just the beginning of a new chapter, one where healing is possible, joy is real, and love, the kind that sees you, will meet you right where you are.